Back in 2021, Travis Scott and Kylie Jenner made headlines for buying their 3-year-old daughter Stormi an entire yellow school bus for her birthday. Apparently, Stormi had a fascination with yellow school buses at the time, and many people understandably found it kinda dystopian. While we peasants are forced to ride old, decrepit buses, the rich are able to momentarily cosplay our experience, free to return to their mansions and Bentleys whenever they please. It basically became a glaring symbol of the unimaginable privilege of the rich, and how, while we are all fighting to survive, working long hours and barely making ends meet, the rich look at this struggle with fascination and intrigue. For everyday people, it's an unfortunate, soul-crushing reality. To the rich, it's interesting and even enviable, at least in a romanticized, dystopian way. It seems like today, as wealth inequality continues to skyrocket, we are continually shown just how jaw-droppingly out of touch the rich can be. There's Bella Hadid talking about not growing up with designer things as if owning them is the norm.
I never growing up had anything designer. My mom wouldn't let me. I think I got my first pair of Louboutins when I graduated high school.
It makes me emotional, actually.
And I mean, how could we forget the absurdity of Tyra Banks when she cosplayed Homlessness and then attempted to brand it as charitable and noble?
I wanted to experience firsthand the desperation of the homeless.
There's also the unending stream of nepo babies who are either incapable of comprehending their privilege or genuinely believe that struggling is poetic. There's the insane trend we see at many high-end fashion brands like Balenciaga or Yeezy, where clothes that look like they are literally from the homeless or a landfill are priced in the thousands. I mean, Balenciaga dead-ass sold these sneakers for almost $1,900. Honestly, it feels like at this point they're just trolling us and playing in our faces. It's like the rich have run out of things to commodify, and so they turn to the most vulnerable in society and think, too many people suffering for free. Let's do something about that. So they appropriate and commodify their struggle and then sell it back to them at unimaginable prices. But here's the thing that a lot of people may not know. It may seem like everywhere we look, the wealthy elite dictate and control our culture and trends, but this is all mostly an illusion. I mean, to be fair, they do influence our politics, media, and economies, all while we helplessly look up to them, endlessly dreaming about what it must be like to not have to worry about money. But what you may not know is that they are also looking right back at you with a similar, albeit dystopian, inspiration as well. There's a reason Mark Zuckerberg got a perm, uses Gen Z lingo, and wears a gold chain now, and it's not just rebranding. That those in privileged positions swear up and down that they came from the middle class just like everyone else. That celebrities constantly appropriate trends from subcultures born out of a struggle they couldn't possibly ever understand. It's because, for the first time in human history, the rich no longer dominate cultural evolution. Society has become too decentralized, the middle class too dominant, and the court of public opinion too against them. The rich may not literally envy our lifestyle or struggles. I mean, they definitely don't want to work 40-hour weeks on minimum wage, but what they do envy is our cultural contributions. Our ability to have genuine experiences and innovate culture through our authenticity, regardless of who our parents are or how much we're worth. Today, I want to talk about why the rich want to be poor so damn bad, from celebrities, indie music, and luxury clothing brands, to psychology, history, and why cosplaying poverty even started. We'll break down the myth of the tortured artist and nobility of suffering, talk about the human desire to fit in, postmodern obsession with subversion, and how our cultural infatuation with being unique has gone so far that it's come full circle. We will then end by explaining how the rich have gotten so rich that they are now the only ones who can afford poverty, but still not rich enough to afford authenticity. From Justin Bieber and Balenciaga to Marie Antoinette and Jesus Christ himself, the story of how we got here is a long and surprising one. Back in November of 2006, the now infamous Tyra Banks show episode titled Homless aired. The Tyra Banks show was a 5-season-long talk show that gave us gems like the Miley Cyrus name change game or the fat suit social experiment.
Versatilely Cyrus, what is the one skill that you have that your fans would be shocked to know that you could do?
In this homeless episode, Tyra brought on Danielle, a woman who was previously homeless and who guided Tyra around Skid Row while she, quote, experienced homelessness herself, which just meant dressing homeless, sleeping on the street for a night, and having cameras follow her around the entire time. Tyra opens the show by sharing some statistics about homelessness in America, which to be fair does a pretty good job at laying out the gravity of the situation and just how close many of us actually are to homelessness compared to the success of the American dream. Then she instantly ruins it by saying she wants to immerse herself in the homeless culture, as if homelessness is an ethnicity or race.
I just want to try to immerse myself as much as possible into the homeless culture.
The show is so absurd, it feels like a campy parody of American reality TV or like a bitch you'd see in a drag show. Tyra then continues to interview Danielle, asking her questions that have obvious answers, giving the show an impressively exploitative feel.
I felt like I was walking into hell on earth.
Tyra displays her laughable, out-of-touchness multiple times in this episode, first saying that she can't believe Danielle used to be homeless based on how she looks now, as if everyone who's homeless has a look, or asking why anyone would choose to live on the street with others in the first place.
Why would you choose to live on a street with so many homeless people? Is there a safety in living with a lot of people that are homeless?
The Tyra Banks show has become iconic simply for how insane and unhinged it was, and it's something you've probably seen in a meme before or in a compilation showing just how insane Tyra is. This specific homeless episode was notoriously criticized for its unapologetic, exploitative sensationalism. It was often compared to America's Next Top Model and the homeless photoshoot challenge she also did, or the infamous race swap challenges. The Tyra Banks show was basically pure exploitation that attempted to masquerade as a public good, helping to expose social issues. These types of overly sensationalized shows might seem shocking, but they were actually pretty common in the late 90s and early 2000s. Think of Oprah having the KKK on, the Ricky Lake show and constant relationship drama, to even the Jenny Jones show, which had one episode that featured secret gay crushes and was so messy it led to an actual murder. This type of show may seem crazy and insane to us today, but it also shouldn't, because social media has shown us that whatever is the most outrageous or divisive gets the most attention and therefore profit. So in some ways, the existence of these shows was more of a reflection of us and what we are weirdly attracted to than the people who host or start them. Where there is demand, there most certainly will be a supply. Now, my video right now is about rich people who cosplay the poor for aesthetics or who genuinely want to be perceived as middle class. And to be fair to Tyra, I don't think she wants to be perceived as poor, and that this show was obviously more of a reflection of her impressive narcissism and ability to make everything about herself. I mean, again, how could we also forget the infamous Miley Cyrus birthday gift?
I have something for you, and it represents me when I was your age.
Okay.
Oh my God.
That is amazing.
That is me at 16 years old.
But I do think this episode was good at showing us something known as performative activism or poverty tourism. It's the idea that on the surface, the show has good intentions, exposing the dark reality of homelessness or attempting to gain empathy through experience, but obviously falls apart with even the slightest amount of critical thinking. Think of Kendall Jenner saving the day with the Pepsi during the Black Lives Matter protests, or just the influencers who speak on social issues with such a go give us nothing girl attitude that it feels laughably performative.
And white people do have white privilege, so
it's unfortunate, but
fill the comments with the fist and spread the positivity and love. Let's go.
So to some, Tyra's appreciation of homeless culture could be seen as admirable, but for most, it was laughably tone deaf. This is because Tyra Banks is obviously a multi-millionaire, owner of multiple properties, and at the time, host of several television series. If she really wanted to help any homeless person, she could have at least created a homeless fund or donated some of her millions to something that would directly benefit them. In other words, it doesn't matter how Tyra dresses or where she sleeps, because at the end of the day, she knows she isn't actually homeless and can go back to her mansion whenever she pleases. It kind of reminds me of when Elon Musk said that if someone could prove to him that he could solve world hunger with his billions, then he would do it. And when the WFP responded with a detailed plan, Elon never replied. The other term, poverty tourism, is actually something we see a lot today, especially on social media. It's the rich Westerners going to impoverished nations and speaking about the struggles of others as if it's the most fascinating, noble thing, which can give the videos an exploitative, voyeuristic, almost zoo-like feel. It's the shameless interviewing of homeless people who are clearly not mentally stable or sober, and then branding it as if they're helping these people, when in reality, they're just exploiting their suffering for views and profit. A really good example of poverty tourism would also be the reality TV show The Simple Life from the early 2000s. The Simple Life was one of the first truly successful reality shows which featured Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie, some of the biggest celebrity socialites of the time, going to different middle class, usually rural, sometimes impoverished families and living with them while working different minimum wage jobs. Now, to be real, right away, I liked the show. I'm a gay man and I like women, and the show was funny and campy. But when I look back from where we are today, with just how much more I am aware of now, and really put my thinking cap on, I don't know, the show is kind of dystopian. It is literally poverty tourism and cosplaying the middle class for fun. And not only that, but us poors who actually have to live that life ate it right up.
I don't know.
What is Walmart?
It's like they sell wall stuff.
I mean, what really made so many of the show's moments iconic was how careless and funny Nicole and Paris were in situations that we peasants could never be. I mean, again, it was funny and entertaining, but at the end of the day, they were only able to behave the way they did because they knew it wasn't actually their life. There are no consequences for the privileged and wealthy, so obviously they can treat everything as so unserious. Some more recent examples of the rich cosplaying the middle class would be the surge in nepo babies who constantly claim they struggle too, or that they are like all of us, the backlash against high-end fashion brands shamelessly branding poverty as luxury, or just the literal appropriation of poverty as an aesthetic, like we see, for example, in Justin Bieber's most recent photo shoot. Now, some people didn't see any issues with this photo shoot, but I mean, again, don't we find it a bit strange, maybe even questionable, that a group of people collectively worth around 600 million are posing in what looks like a dilapidated farmhouse in the middle of nowhere? Like it's from a Time magazine spread exposing the dark side of poverty in America? That isn't weird to anyone else? I mean, to be fair to Justin, his handlers try to market him as this urban white boy light-skinned Bieber, with a lot of his songs having an R&B hip-hop vibe, so I can see why his label is trying to market him in this way, but at the same time, that also makes it almost even worse. But we're going to talk more about the appropriation of aesthetics born from struggle later on.
You're not getting it. It's not clocking to you. It's not clocking to you that I'm standing on business, is it?
What we find today in the modern world is this strange, even uncanny situation where the wealthy have gotten so greedy, so spoiled, so desperate for authenticity that it's like they're bored. They now look to the common person with intrigue, as if we're an interesting artifact of a foreign land. They grow tired of their expensive brands, pristine mansions, and endless opportunities. They want something different, something rugged and full of character. Something more poverty-stricken chic. The rich are now finding inspiration in their twisted perception of the hard-working but admirable nature of the middle-class experience. But how did we get here? Anyone who has studied any type of history at all would know that for most of it, there was an obvious and rigid social and class hierarchy, with those at the bottom looking toward those at the top for inspiration, and those at the top continuing their exclusive traditions without a single thought of what those beneath them like or do. How did this dynamic end up flipping? Well, it has to do with history, psychology, philosophy, and even religion.
Welcome to my little village.
This is the Queen's Hamlet, a rustic romanticized retreat built for Marie Antoinette in the Park of Versailles in 1783. Marie Antoinette was famously the last queen of France before the French Revolution and has forever become a symbol of excess and decadence. While France suffered an ongoing financial crisis, with many of its citizens suffering and even starving, Antoinette would spend lavishly on fashion, luxuries, and gambling. Marie Antoinette is famously attributed as telling the starving peasants to eat cake in response to pleas for bread, although most historians now refute this as myth.
And when they went to the queen to tell her her subjects had no bread, do you know what she said?
let them eat cake.
Marie Antoinette's simulation of peasant village life was quite revolutionary. Now, to be fair, she didn't invent the concept, as it was already quite common for those with great wealth and influence to create idyllic villages or dress like peasants at parties. But the practice in general did mark one of the first widely known examples of the wealthy elite cosplaying poverty.
Oh, I must do this more often. I love the country.
For example, the Queen's Hamlet featured several buildings, like a farmhouse, a dairy, a barn, a mill, and a tower in the form of a lighthouse. You might notice that it looks quite rustic and charming, like it's been taken straight from an idyllic farm-like fairy tale. And that's the point. You see, Marie Antoinette and her friends would often purposely dress down while walking these grounds. Simple white muslin dresses and straw hats, as if they were peasant farmers, cosplaying the pastoral experience. Remember, at this time, those who worked on farms worked long hours in difficult conditions, often for very little pay, and their life expectancies were far shorter due to all this hard work too. But what we see in the Queen's Hamlet is a romanticized version of that experience. This practice of viewing those in hard-working, poverty-stricken positions in an idealized romantic way was not only a glaring symbol of how out of touch the wealthy can be, but also represented a real shift in how poverty itself was viewed compared to the past. Going as far back as the ancient Romans and Greeks, the common person looked up to whoever was in power or wealthy with fascination and attempted to emulate them. And the commoner, or poverty-stricken, were seen as deplorable in almost every way. They were seen as immoral, unsanitary, and were the last place anyone of high status would look to for inspiration. In ancient Rome, emperor worship was standard, and like today, the average person would attempt to mimic the style and behavior of those with great influence and power. Olympians were seen as heroes, people copied the grooming habits of the elites, and some poor citizens would mimic the drinking parties of the rich, reclining while eating and having small gatherings. In medieval Europe, rulers were legitimized through something known as divine right, or the idea that the monarchy got their authority from God, and therefore their subjects looked to them with awe and fascination. Because of this association of royalty with divinity, villagers often viewed their leaders as almost gods themselves, capable of special healing powers.
I'd like to give your son my blessing.
I'd be honored.
Everyone, including the poor, looked to them for fashion and cultural inspiration. Like I talked about in my last video, the idea of a decentralized popular culture didn't yet exist. Culture was not democratized or ubiquitous in society, but was gatekept and centralized within the elites or royalty. For most of human history, culture trends and fashion were dictated by those in high positions and only by them. It's not that the common person or the poverty-stricken didn't have their own culture. All humans do, but just that culture itself was seen as something objective in society. What the rich and powerful did, thought, and liked was objectively better because they were better in every way, closer to God or the gods, morally pure in their actions, and just physically different and better than everyone else.
He is for all mankind.
The first real change we saw that shifted this perception was the story of Jesus and the widespread adoption of Christianity throughout Europe. It may seem crazy to us today in a world where Christianity is the largest religion on earth, but at the time of its creation, it was incredibly unique and subversive.
Is this the man you think so dangerous? This? The man that aspires to be a king?
In the Roman Empire, as with most ancient societies, forgiveness, unconditional love, meekness, and poverty were seen as things to avoid and as going against everything a strong society should stand for. Gods were not born of everyday people into poverty or able to be killed. Not everyone was worthy of divine blessings or love, and forgiveness and mercy were seen as weak. Gods were traditionally great warriors and leaders, not pacifists who preached all this lovey-dovey nonsense. Gods were from elite families with wealth and royalty, not from the commoners. Wealth, pride, and status were virtuous, not seen as something to suppress or avoid. Those who turned the other cheek, spoke of unconditional forgiveness or the equality of everyone, were not only seen as weak and pathetic, but also insane.
The greatest of kings, born in the most humble of places.
The social status of Jesus himself as an ordinary carpenter who was born in a manger was also quite subversive. It centered through association with divinity, the average person, and even a less than desirable commoner lifestyle. Think of it as one of the OG underdog stories. the OG romanticizing my everyday working class life stories. Before Christianity, the idea of this type of subversion was rare. Those with great wealth or status were seen as justified through divinity. In other words, the gods wouldn't allow someone they didn't like to have power or wealth, so that's why some people were better off than others. It was a very literal way of looking at society, and the poor were not venerated or seen with any potential at all in the same way as the privileged and wealthy were. No one should want to be poor or meek. There's nothing wrong with indulging in your wealth and being prideful, because the gods have blessed you with these things, so you might as well enjoy them. The crucifixion, along with Jesus' teachings against wealth, indulgence, or pride, also did something radical. It shifted how people viewed suffering or things that would typically induce suffering. Poverty wasn't horrific or a sign of immorality anymore. It was pious and even admirable. Suffering was no longer a sign of weakness and could actually have a valuable meaning. Christianity aligned suffering with virtue and began to inspire people to view those in dire situations as not only admirable, but even holier or closer to God. Now, it wouldn't be fair to claim that Christianity was the only belief to inspire this new way of viewing the world, as many other Eastern and even Greek philosophies also preached similar things. It's just that when looking at America and modern Western society in general, Christianity and its stories and values had an overwhelming effect on its history and culture. So coming back to Marie Antoinette, Christianity and its anti-establishment emphasis on subversive values really helped plant the seeds for viewing poverty and suffering as admirable or even desirable. The second, and arguably more influential reason we see Marie Antoinette-like behavior back then and today has to do with a movement known as Romanticism.
This is the story of man's escape from the shackles of commerce and industry to the freedom of nature.
Romanticism was a philosophical, artistic, and literary movement from the late 18th and 19th centuries that began in Europe. It was in response to the rigid values of the Enlightenment, with the Enlightenment being in response to the thousands of years of superstition and religion that dominated European society. The Enlightenment was a philosophical and intellectual movement that promoted and centered human reason, logic, skepticism, individualism, and technological or scientific progress. It was basically like all of European society woke up and realized that religion hadn't really done much for advancing society, and that humanity's potential was in their own hands, not in that of some distant, abstract deity. But like most ideologies, these Enlightenment-era values also became very rigid and dominant, almost like they had become a religion themselves. And eventually, people began to rebel against them. One of these first rebellions was the Romantic movement. Romanticism embraced a return to a more spiritual, emotional, even irrational view of the world. It embraced individualism, subjectivism, the natural world, the sublime, and nostalgia. So the Enlightenment created all these new movements, which led to the rapid development of cities and industries, and its thinkers would argue that this is a good thing because it's progress, and progress is good. Nature is wild, untamed, and wasteful, and it exists for humans to sculpt into something better. The Romantics would reject this, pointing to the pollution and disease of modern cities, instead choosing to appreciate natural landscapes as they are, untouched by human influence. An Enlightenment thinker would argue that progress is inevitable, and that the further we look back, the worse things get. While the Romantic would say that the Industrial Revolution is destroying the environment and that modern factory jobs are soul-crushing and unnatural.
At a time when the world was becoming increasingly mechanized, the Romantics sought an intense relationship with the natural world.
The Romantic would instead look back on the past with rose-tinted glasses, viewing it in an idyllic, mythologized way. Enlightenment-era thinkers would say emotions are irrational and that we should seek to restrain them in favor of logic and reason, while the Romantics would reject this, embracing emotion as interesting and poetic. But perhaps nothing describes Romanticism better than its appreciation of the irrational. This is where Marie Antoinette and her cosplaying poverty come in. On paper, idealizing a life of hard work, dirt, and poverty would seem clearly irrational, but Romanticism influenced people to reject that. To Marie Antoinette, pastoral living wasn't hard and undesirable, it was artsy, noble, and idyllic. What Romanticism did was basically give people permission to be irrational as an art form. It was a way to think and view the world not by critically analyzing or questioning it, but by feeling and appreciating it, even if you had to idealize and distort a bit to make that possible. Romanticism made it far easier for us to view suffering in less than desirable circumstances as admirable and even aesthetically pleasing. While numerous movements have come and gone since Romanticism, its influence still dominates modern society, culture, and art to this day, and it's something you've definitely heard about if you spent any time on social media.
One of the most famous
residents.
trailers, yeah, the first one you see.
This is Lizzie Grant giving a tour of her New Jersey trailer park back in 2008. If she looks weirdly familiar and you aren't sure why, that's because Lizzie Grant is actually Lana Del Rey, just an earlier underground version. Now, while contemporary Lana has distanced herself from her unreleased early work, it has still come to define her in the aesthetic she's come to represent. Ever since the days of Tumblr and the popularity of Americana GIFs, Lana Del Rey has become a symbol of romanticism. Her early works focus a lot on the working class experience, romanticizing many aspects of a mundane, at times depressing, even dangerous life in ways that you didn't even know were possible.
Let's do drugs, make love with our teachers. I'm a fan of the pro-animation. I do the drugs to stop the food craving. If you wanna get high with me, I'm in the back doing crack, drinking Pepsi.
This trailer park life has become a symbol of the Lizzie Grant days, where Lana would often sing about her trailer and surviving on nothing but bread and oranges. She'd poetically paint a picture of an uncertain life, living on the road and chasing dangerous men who don't seem interested. She talks about how she doesn't care about going to prison for those she loves, how she is the gangster Nancy Sinatra, and just how much she loves Kmart lip gloss, being white trash, or working at the local diner. For many of us who really enjoy Lana's unreleased work, we find it gives us a window into a world of beauty and danger, meaning and subversion, but also shows us how we can reclaim our own lives as well. To Lana fans, she is the queen of romanticism and shows those of us from mundane, less than desirable, even poverty-stricken backgrounds that we can find beauty and meaning in our lives too. If Lana can go through all these things, be from a low-income background, and even come from a trailer park herself and still find a way to give it such significance and beauty, then we can too. Except it was all a lie. Lana Del Rey didn't come from poverty, and almost everything she sang about in her early work was fictional romanticization.
It was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie. She lied.
Lana Del Rey is New England old money, with her grandfather and father being the CEO of one of the largest corporations in America, owning several properties and real estate companies. You can watch my deep dive on Lana's family if you don't believe me. Now, to be fair to Lana, this is something that is insanely common today, especially in indie spaces.
I'm like shaking and sweating profusely.
We also have Grimes, who notoriously presented herself as a DIY indie artist who came from nothing, living in a shack and eating squirrels to survive, only to actually come from an upper middle class Canadian family, going to private Catholic schools, and eventually marrying the richest man on earth. To a lesser extent, we have Lady Gaga, who, while never explicitly saying she came from poverty, has often been touted as having nothing but a Party City wig and a dream online, despite the fact that her parents were from the Upper West Side of Manhattan and helped pay for her apartment so she could focus on her dreams. There's Taylor Swift, who in the beginning was marketed as this rural country bumpkin, even though she was originally from Pennsylvania and her dad was a wealthy stockbroker and her mother, conveniently, a marketing executive. The more we find out that so many of the famous people we look up to came from wealth, the more people ask, why is it always the case? And it always has to do with opportunity. There are talented people everywhere, every day, right now, who are working towards their goals and dreams. It's just that they also have to work a full-time job, might suffer from debilitating mental illnesses, don't have elite connections, or the generational wealth to fund it. Those who have these privileges simply have more opportunities from the get-go, which greatly increases their odds of succeeding. But why is it that so many who come from such wealth and opportunity tend to obsess over denying it? Almost like they want to be perceived as middle class or even poor. Well, coming back to Lana Del Rey, Grimes, and indie music, it again partly has to do with Romanticism. Nearly all music in the modern world is influenced in some way by the ideas found in Romanticism. Modern music tends to not be bound by rationality, driven by emotion and subjectivity, and loves to delve into all sorts of topics no matter how dark or taboo. These are inherently romantic ideas. But Romanticism applied to wealth and privilege doesn't really hit as well. This is because attempting to romanticize the good life doesn't make much sense because it is already seen that way by default. What good is a song that talks about how great privilege is? Like, yeah, we already know that. Most good art is subversive in some way and challenges current norms and ideas. Sadness isn't something to be avoided, it's beautiful and artsy. Poverty isn't embarrassing and shameful, it's poetic and meaningful. Heartbreak isn't just pain, but also art. This subversion is what makes the use of Romanticism so impactful. But like the popularity of Lana's early poverty-core aesthetic, what Romanticism also did was become a powerful way to cope. It became a tool that could help those who suffer in some way by justifying and legitimizing it. Again, suffering no longer becomes something to avoid or that you should wish to escape, but becomes an art form itself. Just another part of life that isn't ugly, but beautiful and significant. This is Vincent van Gogh, depicted in the movie Lust for Life, which was released in 1956. This scene depicts one of the most famous stories surrounding Van Gogh, the moment he spirals into a mental breakdown after an argument with a friend, eventually cutting off part of his ear and giving it to a random woman. Vincent van Gogh was a Dutch post-impressionist painter who created over 2,000 works of art, including 900 paintings and 1,100 drawings and sketches, and despite all of this, he only sold a single painting while he was still alive. Van Gogh was known to suffer from mental illness, having multiple hallucinations, breakdowns, psychotic episodes, and hospitalizations during his life. Vincent van Gogh has become a quintessential example of the tortured artist trope, or the idea that being exceptionally gifted often comes with suffering like mental illness. A more recent example of the popularity of this trope would be the sad girl, sad boy days from the 2010 Tumblr and SoundCloud eras. We again had people like Lana Del Rey, Sky Fiara, or Marina and the Diamonds, sad girls who were impossible to escape from on Tumblr. There was also Arctic Monkeys, Lil Peep, and XXXTentacion. What we saw in the 2010s was the ideas of Romanticism and the tortured artist being taken to the extreme. If you spent any time on Tumblr, you would almost start to feel like mental illness had become a trend. Everywhere you looked or listened, everyone was talking about mental illness or singing about it. For a moment, it literally seemed like doing drugs, self-harming, and suffering from mental illness had literally become the mainstream. It was like art, music, and culture itself were directly correlated with how sad you were or whatever diagnosis you had. It's not that there isn't any truth in the idea that suffering can sometimes inspire some of the most unique art forms as a way to cope, just that it became seen as absolutely necessary for its creation. I mean, there are quite literally studies done on how neurodivergence can inspire subversive and innovative art, but that also doesn't mean they're the only ones who can, or that it has to be like an artistic prerequisite. Like Christ nobly suffering on the cross for humanity's sins, the tortured artist trope and sad girl Tumblr eras portrayed distress as beautiful and poetic. Combined with the ideas found in Romanticism, and like Christ's sacrificial death being required for humanity's salvation, suffering becomes the currency of good art. Suffering is not something that should be obviously avoided or treated with caution, but can now be seen as artistic and full of meaning. But the reason we see the rich cosplaying poverty and obsessing over the middle class experience is not just because of Christianity, Romanticism, or the tortured artist trope. It also has to do with the birth of the middle class and the Industrial Revolution. Like I talked about in more detail in my previous video, the Enlightenment, and to a greater extent the Industrial Revolution, radically reshaped human society in rapid ways. Like we mentioned earlier, before the development of liberal democracy, capitalism, and individualism, culture was very different. Culture was originally seen as objective, meaning only those with great influence and wealth could take part in and develop it. What the Industrial Revolution and democracy did was flip this on its head. Culture was suddenly democratized, and instead of there being only two classes, the upper and lower, a new class began to develop. The middle class. The creation of the middle class suddenly shifted the cultural center of gravity from the tippy top to the far larger middle and center. Because the middle class now had far greater bargaining power in the form of new disposable income, corporations and companies also began to cater to them. No longer were the rich the only ones who could influence culture, now anyone and everyone could. This led to the birth of a new cultural space, one completely detached from what the rich or wealthy thought or cared about. What we saw in the 20th century was the birth of a middle-class dominated culture. We saw the creation of popular music, fashion trends, and slang, all dictated and born from the average middle-class experience. The values of democracy and the way it gave power to the average person also shifted how we collectively viewed the rich. Gone are the days of the wealthy and powerful being justified by divine providence, and in came the era of collectively, instinctively hating them. This obviously also doesn't mean that the rich just stopped having any influence at all. I mean, we see celebrities starting trends all the time. It just means their monopoly on culture has disappeared. And actually, now that I think about it, in the modern world, even the trends that celebrities do start are increasingly originating from those in the middle class and then falsely attributed to them, like the constant appropriation of trends started by Black, brown, and Latino people. Again, in a democratized, capitalistic world, the rich don't really have a choice when it comes to catering to the middle class, and that means our cultural contributions will consistently be centered, appropriated, or constantly replicated in mainstream society. This is also why I'm so against people who complain about modern art as being so bad and horrible, and why can't we return to real art? Because whether you are aware of it or not, you are perpetuating elitist fascist propaganda. Classical art still exists and is constantly created. It's just not given the same amount of attention because culture and art are democratized now. And in our current information overload world, whatever is the most thought-provoking, eye-catching, or innovative tends to get the most attention. No one is saying you can't create or enjoy classical art. We just don't think it should be forcibly centered, and that we should let whatever people actually like naturally get attention and rise to the top. So what this led to was not only the rich, the powerful, or the corporate being forced to center middle-class culture for profit, but also led to our dominance affecting the psychology of the rich themselves. So what I mean by this is that at the end of the day, we are all still human beings, at least for now. And because humans are some of the most social animals on Earth, this also leads to an ironic situation. One of the simplest, albeit hard to believe reasons the rich seem to want to be poor or middle class is that sometimes they literally just want to fit in.
Help me, I'm rich.
I know a lot of people aren't going to like this reason, but rich people listen to the same radio, watch the same television, and use the same social media as everyone else. And guess what dominates it all? The middle class experience being expressed in a million different ways. The ultra wealthy live exceptionally different lives from the majority of people, and if they're famous, a lot of the things you and I take for granted, like being able to eat at a restaurant, go to school, or just have anonymity on the street, don't exist for them. I mean, maybe Stormy was inspired by movies or shows she saw on TV of kids riding yellow school buses to school. Maybe some nepo babies are so influenced by the popular culture they consume that they inevitably want to share in it, even if that means having to lie to appear authentic. At the end of the day, humans have an innate desire to fit in and be accepted, and that means whatever appears to be the most widespread or popular will sometimes affect the rich too. On this point, remember when I said in the beginning that Mark Zuckerberg's recent makeover wasn't just about rebranding, but was also about fitting in? Well, now let's focus on that rebranding point. What democracy did was force the rich to have to care about what the average person did, thought, and cared about to ensure self-preservation. If the public had a good perception of you, maybe they won't vote for someone who's going to regulate and fine your corporations into oblivion. So when it comes to not just celebrities, but the ultra wealthy, what we will sometimes see is a covert rebranding, carefully orchestrated to attempt to appeal to the public as a good, just like everyone else guy, even someone who keeps up with current trends and slang. It's a way to manipulate the public through relatability. And if the US continues down its kleptocratic, oligarchic path, it will be interesting to see this charm offensive suddenly disappear. Remember, the only reason the rich are attempting to mimic the middle class right now is because we are still centered through democracy. But if democracy is destroyed, they won't need to care anymore. Once that happens, we will quickly revert to the previous gatekeeping of culture and two-class system like what had existed for thousands of years. So what the Enlightenment, democracy, and Industrial Revolution did was gradually democratize society and decentered the rich to culturally favor the average and middle class. This, along with the belief that suffering is noble and romantic irrationality poetic, helps to also explain why many rich people have this distorted, admirable perception of the middle class or even those in poverty. But what further decentralized everything and got us to where we are in the present was something that began in the mid-20th century, known as postmodernism. Now, I'm not going to delve too deeply into postmodernism because I again went into way more depth in my previous video, but to quickly summarize, postmodernism led to a rapid decentralization of not just ideas or previously held truths, but also the existence of any objectivity at all, which affected culture as well. It led to skepticism and the rejection of whatever is perceived as mainstream becoming the norm. So, what do I mean by this? Before postmodernism, culture was a bit more centralized and mindfully experienced. Whatever was considered big or mainstream at the time was popular for a reason, and so people consumed and enjoyed it less critically. What postmodernism did was reject this notion in favor of pure skepticism of anything popular, pure disdain for whatever is mainstream. So it wasn't just about distrusting your government or religious leaders, it was also about whatever popular culture upheld as objectively good as well. It was the idea of I'm different and not like everyone else becoming mainstream. So now, as soon as something becomes popular, it means we should reject and hate it simply because it's so popular. So think of Benson Boone, Doechii, or Ice Spice. Now, you may or may not have justifiable reasons to criticize these artists, but a lot of times, people will dislike them simply because they are mainstream and only for that reason. Postmodern skepticism of anything mainstream instilled a cultural obsession with individual uniqueness. It was the concept of subverting norms becoming the new norm, and that can only happen for so long until it kind of collapses onto itself. So what do I mean by this? Well, it's the pursuit of uniqueness going so far that rich people have come full circle and are now attempting to appropriate poverty and brand it as luxury. It's the most god-awful shoes and fashion trend starting simply because it's different and rejects current cultural standards. It's artists pretentiously creating art that really has no value or meaning beyond the fact that it's eye-grabbing and different. It's the era of being different for different's sake, or rejecting whatever is mainstream simply because it's mainstream. And this brings us to Nara Smith. Nara Smith is an online influencer married to Lucky Bluesmith, another influencer and model. She has come to be known for her trad wife-like aesthetic and cooking videos she does on Instagram and TikTok, usually using all fresh ingredients and going to elaborate lengths to make sure everything is homemade. Now, to be fair to Nara, I do think some of the criticisms against her and Lucky are far-fetched, and I personally don't think there is anything wrong with dressing the way she does or with people making their food from scratch or living on a farm. But what I do want to do is use her as an example to start a larger conversation about how poverty, farm life, or wellness and fitness culture are coming full circle to now represent wealth and privilege. So what I mean by this is that you would think on the surface, just cooking food and using all natural ingredients, or even living on a farm and tending to all these animals is not a sign of wealth, especially being that historically it was associated with poverty and less opportunity. But what we see today, as living standards continue to decline and people work longer hours for less pay, is that these things that would previously be representative of poverty or the lower class are becoming inverted. Time has now become one of the most literal forms of privilege. Most people are working far too long to have any time to spend the hours and hours it takes to use all natural ingredients or choose to tend to animals on a farm. In this same way, how can you expect people who are working 50 hours a week to find the time to work out, let alone afford extravagant, healthy, organic food? This point also brings us back to Balenciaga, Lizzie Grant's cosplay, and how poverty is becoming a privilege. When you come from such a status with such opportunity, you can choose to indulge in struggle for funsies without any of the downsides people who are actually forced into that position have to experience. Like Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie, the middle class isn't a reality, it's a holiday destination that one momentarily experiences. It's like a fascinating vacation, a way to immerse yourself in something that would typically be soul-crushing or dangerous for the average person, but that is just a romantic fantasy for the rich. In our modern world, health, time, and even poverty itself have become a privilege. But on the flip side, the only reason I'm talking about this right now, that you're watching this video, or even that we are aware of any of these realities in the first place, is a direct result of our power and influence. We are living in a time defined by paradox. Yes, we have the largest wealth inequality in history, and yes, there is unfathomable government corruption that seems to just get worse and worse with each new day. But we also have an awareness and access to ideas and information that did not exist before. There is a reason that so many people complain that everything is too deep or woke now, or that wokeness is mainstream. It's because we aren't just passively existing in an unjust world anymore. We're consistently speaking on and responding to it. I know that some people who watch my videos might find them too negative or depressing, and honestly, that's only because I speak on the reality of our world. But that also doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom. We have so many problems today, but we also have some pretty good things going for us as well. Our societies are far more decentralized compared to the past. The rich, at least for now, still don't have a monopoly on culture and mainstream discourse, and our obsession with skepticism makes us far less likely to be manipulated by those in power compared to literally all of human history. If nothing else, the fact that this is even happening and the powerful are so obsessed with cosplaying the middle class should show you right there the influence and power the average person has, no matter how strong the illusion may be. Yes, suffering and being forced to work hard, long hours shouldn't be viewed as noble or blindly accepted as just the way it is. But what should be viewed that way is our ability to recognize our strength and influence and our authentic impact on modern culture. I mean, we live in a world where billionaires and celebrities look to us for inspiration. It's annoying and inauthentic, but a pretty glaring symbol of our inherent worth and our historically improbable but incredibly commanding influence.